and without a lot of effort.
See, I don't see it that way at all. I mean, for one thing, just the way that the Chiefs offense operates is about creating space, no matter what. Like it's the combination of threats that they pose to every level of the defense. And you're just going to take whatever shot the space gives you. And in terms of matchup, I mean, the extent that we talked about, I think the 2018 matchup, there was a big play in that game where Hill had Richard Sherman beat, like straight up beat. Like they were one-on-one. There was no safety help. He had 3 steps on Richard Sherman, and Mahomes threw it. He didn't lead Tyreek perfectly. I mean, it was like a perfect route, but he didn't put it in front of Tyreek. He kind of threw it behind him, so Tyreek had to like slow up just a little bit right as he was passing the goal line. Sherman, made up the distance, broke up the pass, maybe got there a little early, but either way, and everyone's kept on looking at that. Like, this is going to be the key matchup, and like, look at what happened last time. And I think there's a lot in there, right? I mean, the fact is that the Tyreek Hill, I mean, basically nobody can cover him, can keep pace with him, and especially with Richard Sherman's 34-year-old legs, or 35, I don't know how. I would actually attack Richard Sherman with Tyreek Hill, just because, there's only so much that he can do, especially in a zone defense. If he wants to give a huge cushion to Tyreek, fine. We'll throw, 10, 15-yard comebacks to Tyreek all game. And I just think, like, a few more plays like that we saw in 2018, where Mahomes actually leads him a little bit more, places a little bit better. And that's Richard Sherman getting roasted. Granted, I think he's been playing better this year than last year, but still, I mean, I think that's not a matchup you shy away from. I think that's one you go after.
But surely, Nick, surely they'll put safety help over the top against Hill, and I wouldn't throw against Sherman if he's got safety help.
Sure, and I don't think Mahomes will take that shot in those situations. And if they're doubling Hill, then that means there's one less guy covering either Sammy Watkins, Travis Kelce, or McCole Hardman. And that's kind of how this all operates. It's about just and that's why I think it's sort of been interesting the way that the Chiefs have had these slow starts. I mean, some of it's just been like weird stuff happening in these 2 playoff games that led up to this, but some of it is. I mean, it's a similar sort of thing that we've seen, in those like last year's 2 games against the Patriots, where all we know is that Mahomes can probably beat us no matter what we show him. And so we just have to show him something he's never seen before. And I think the list of things that Mahomes hasn't seen yet is getting smaller and smaller. But nonetheless, I would expect the 49ers to throw out something totally crazy or something really weird, and just something that they know that the Chiefs haven't prepared for because they haven't put it on tape ever, and what have you. And it just takes them a little while to adjust to that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they do something completely unconventional in terms of their coverages. But nonetheless, I mean, there's just so many weapons. You just can't, I mean, you can take away 1 or 2 and the other 2 guys or 3 guys can still hurt you. So it's going to be interesting on that side of the ball. It's going to be interesting on the other side of the ball too, I think. Just, we had a kind of a conversation going this morning on the Slack group about, Tyrann Mathieu and the way he's used. And, because the 49ers can attack both on the ground, but George Kittle is a huge threat in the intermediate areas. And then they still have, speed at wide receiver and on those play action passes over the top. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting, coverage conversation on the other side as well.
One of the things that Warren Sharp made a point of in his dissertation, as you put it, James, was the fact that the number 1 team in regards to explosive plays from the line of scrimmage is actually the San Francisco 49ers, with the Kansas City Chiefs coming in at number 2. 13% of their passes produced gains of 20-plus yards. Actually, the Chiefs ranked 9th in that metric. The NFL average was 9% in explosive passing offense. No passing offense in the last 4 years has produced explosive gains at a better rate than the 2019 49ers. And that was sort of what I was getting at in the Tyrann Mathieu conversation that I was sort of hinting at. Sort of, if Tyrann Mathieu is coming up and playing close in the box, then you're just you're leaving that hole open for Jimmy Garoppolo to go deep, and he will do it, and he'll hit it.
Yeah, and I think that comes off the creativity of their play selection, compounded with the fact of how effective they run the ball. And it's a thing where, up until recently, teams would pretty much pound the rock over and over and over again, force you to bring that safety down into the box and then go over the top with, straight up pass plays because you were outmanned in your secondary typically 4-on-3, somebody was going to be open. What the Niners do is mix a lot of things up with their motions, with their shifts, and they come out sometimes unbalanced to the point to where you think, okay, here's 3 tight ends, 1 wide receiver, 1 running back. They're definitely not throwing the ball. And they can gash you for a 50-yard play to one of the tight ends or that wide receiver, and you don't even know what hit you because you're like, wait, how do we get outflanked on this? And there's a lot of scheme and creativity in their passing game to where they can get you flowing one way and hit something on the backside. And it's like, wait, where did that guy come from? And when you see it on the replay, someone's missed an assignment or someone took themselves out of the play because they read something wrong or they misread their key. They didn't know that was supposed to be their guy because the running back came out of the backfield on a wheel route. Just a bevy of things that they can, catch defenses off guards with. So discipline is going to be key on both the linebacker and secondary levels of the Chiefs defense.
There's this weird narrative, and I'm guessing that it has to do with the way that the postseason has played out, that Jimmy Garoppolo is nothing more than a game manager, and he is not. He is much better than a game manager. I mean, when we talk about tiers of quarterbacks, I'm not putting him in the elite tier. He's not there, obviously, but he's right below it in the very good tier, in the better than average tier.
Yeah, I'd have to disagree with you there.
Well, I've got stats that tell me differently, Neil.
Yeah, and I've seen a head coach I can point to tell you that it's not true. He is a creation of the Shanahan genius. I bet you if you took that Garoppolo guy and put him in a crappy team like Washington or something, he'd be awful. I think a lot of that is Shanahan. I think he's got tremendous help with the offensive line and running game. I can't agree with you there, Jay.
Yeah, you also have to remember that the reason that narrative has been spun is because of the divisional round game against the Vikings, where he threw that interception that pretty much allowed Minnesota to get their last score of the game, which, allowed them to kick a field goal. The Niners defense did hold. They didn't allow them to gain many yards after that turnover. But since then, he hasn't thrown the ball much. I think he threw it
I think it's 9 times,
7 more times in that game, and then 8 total in the conference title game. And, people will look at that and say, well, if he hadn't thrown that pick, maybe there would have been more balance in the second half of that divisional round and the conference title game, across the board. But I disagree. I will say that Jimmy Garoppolo is in a good, bordering on very good category. Elite, no, but I think there's potential there for him to be, one of the best quarterbacks in the league going forward. But if he doesn't get opportunities because they're playing football like it's 1962, I mean, what do you want us to do about that? I mean, they gashed the Packers and kept doing it because it was working. I mean, when you have a 3-headed monster at running back and any one of those guys can go off and they're all averaging 5+ yards per carry, you're going to keep turning around and handing the ball off. So, yeah, go ahead, Neil.
I was just going to say, James, he does look like he's got a killer interception in him every game you watch.
And that was my knock on him in the beginning of the season because at one point he was even with touchdowns to interceptions, and Pod wanted me to, say that he was playing very well. And while, you take away, if you take away those interceptions, like I haven't said that before about any other quarterback on here, but he's okay. Look, at the point in the season which I was ripping him, and albeit, yes, I was deservedly ripping him because he was on a 1-to-1 clip with touchdowns to interceptions, and that's not good quarterbacking. He cleaned that up towards the latter half of the season, or maybe the game plan changed and they decided to get very run heavy and hide some of the contested throws that he would have to make by allowing the scheme to evolve to the point to where separation the receivers were getting downfield was great enough for him to not mess it up. He wasn't throwing into any tight windows. That one thing I will say towards the latter half of the season and even into the playoffs, he hasn't had to make a throw to any receiver downfield or running back or tight end that had a defender draped all over him. The intended targets either had their man beat or there was a good 2 yards of separation from the nearest defender. So you can't really mess that up, you know. And yeah, he went 4 of 8 in the conference title game. I'm pretty sure at least one of those was a throwaway because he was being chased out of the pocket.
When it comes to making a pick, I've got some difficulties on this one. The 49ers are obviously my boyfriend team.
Before we make picks, Jay, before we make picks, we haven't spoken about special teams. I think one of the things we've seen from both these teams throughout the year have been that they both have special teams who have made plays at crucial times throughout the season. So fascinating to see that in the game.
I think it's also going to be a huge thing just because the Chiefs are just scoring at a higher rate on a per drive basis than the 49ers by a lot. You know, I mean, the game pace is going to affect a lot of that. I actually don't think some of the whole we just run a ton that's going to keep Mahomes off the field. It still doesn't matter. If you take a 10-minute drive that scores 3 points or less, you're still losing. Because, I mean, even if the Chiefs take only 3 minutes for their touchdown drive, it doesn't matter. You have to give the ball back to them at the end of your possession one way or the other. And so I think the Niners are going to have to try to steal a possession, potentially with special teams or two, to keep this, keep up essentially.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the Niners are my boyfriend team. I wasn't fully on board their bandwagon until I dumped the Browns. Even though I was highest on the Niners than anybody. I don't care what anyone says. I had the Niners in the playoffs in the preseason. The Chiefs are the AFC team, and if they win, I'm going to win $50 thanks to a preseason free bet I got from one of those betting sites that used to sponsor us. Of course, I placed it on the AFC to win the Super Bowl, but I was assuming my team was going to be the rep.
Some other squad that's not there this week.
You were right behind the Steelers, weren't you, early on?
Yeah. I will say, with all of this, I'm taking the over. 54.5. We're going over that, gentlemen. I think we could place the over at like 60, and I think you could still take the over. There's going to be a lot of
pushing it.
I think there's going to be a lot of points in this one. And ultimately, I think I don't want to, but I think I have to take the Chiefs -1. I got a bunch of squares, so I'm going to be rooting for those to come in. The only one I know right now is Chiefs 6, Niners 0. So go 6-0.
Go missing an extra point.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh.
Or 2 field goals.
No.
Well, are we going around the sort of table here?
Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I would say, Jay, clearly for me, it's all about history here. And these teams have played 13 times in their history. It's 7 wins to the 49ers, 6 to the Chiefs. And I look at your over and under there, and in those games, the 49ers have averaged 18.8 points a game, whereas the Chiefs have averaged 24.1 points a game. And, is it going to be like the 1971 Classic that we saw where the Chiefs won, or is it going to be more like the 1982 game where the 49ers won? I think those play an important role in the outcome of this game. So, for me, I'm going to take the 49ers in a close one, something around 47-21.
47-21. That's not very close.
Close.
I was just seeing if you're awake or not.
Okay.
But I'll take it 47-21 to the 49ers.
Interesting. You might as well
49
49
just for the sake of the name. I mean,
yeah. And my other tip will be, I don't think Mahomes sees the second quarter.
Oh man, Neil. So Neil has brought up special teams and has said that Mahomes is getting knocked out of this game. If either of those things happen, I hope somebody bet some money on that and is making a lot of dough.
I wouldn't say knocked out of the game, Jay. I would say splattered across the field and scraped up.
Oh my gosh.
I also do hope the FBI is listening to this because clearly Neil has taken out a hit on Patrick Mahomes.
Now, you've got to chop off the head of the snake, Jay.
Oh my gosh.
All right, James, what do you got?
I'm mainly rooting for the Chiefs only because of Andy Reid. Look, Nick and I, when we've had discussions about our teams respectively, we always somehow get on Andy Reid. And his ability or inability to manage a game down the stretch. I mentioned it on the